crystal-lit ballroom falls quiet as Alexander Brooks raises his glass and smiles, inviting his pregnant ex-wife forward like a spectacle. Erica Long walks in alone, dressed simply her presence, drawing whispers and restrained laughter from guests who have already judged her. He calls her a mistake he outgrew. No one stops him. No one questions it. Erica says nothing. She only watches her calm, too steady for the moment. Somewhere behind the crowd, a man in a dark suit lowers a folder without opening it yet. The truth has already arrived. It just hasn't spoken. If you believe dignity doesn't need noise to be powerful, stay with this story until the end. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if stories like this matter to you, consider subscribing. You'll want to see how this one unfolds. In the months before anyone would have thought to measure her worth in numbers, Erica Long had already learned how to measure silence. She was 32, composed in a way that often made people underestimate her. Her voice was soft, her presence unobtrusive, and her habits precise. She noticed details others ignored. The way a conversation shifted when money entered the room. The way a smile could tighten when expectations weren't met. The way a person revealed themselves most clearly when they believed no one was watching. Erica rarely interrupted. She listened. Alexander Brooks had once admired that about her. They met in Chicago, years before New York, and the polished glass towers that would later define his ambitions. At the time, Alexander was different, not entirely, but enough. He was still driven, still focused, but his edges were softer, less sharpened by comparison. He spoke about building something meaningful, not just profitable. He listened when Erica spoke, even if she spoke quietly. Their first apartment had been small. The kitchen counter doubled as a workspace. They split expenses unevenly without turning it into a discussion of value. When Erica cooked, Alexander would sit nearby, scrolling through financial articles, occasionally reading out headlines, as if inviting her into his world. Back then, he didn't seem to need her to match it. The shift didn't happen overnight. It never does. It began when Alexander moved firms. A better title, a higher ceiling, a different kind of room, one where conversations were less about ideas and more about proximity to power. Erica noticed the change before he acknowledged it. His language evolved. Words like network, leverage, and positioning replaced the simpler goals he once described. He started coming home later. Not exhausted, but energized in a way that didn't include her. At first, he still tried to bridge the gap. "You should come to one of these events," he had said one evening, loosening his tie as he stood near the doorway. "It would be good for you to see how things work." Erica looked up from the table where she had been organizing documents, household bills receipts, nothing extraordinary. "I wouldn't know anyone there. You'd know me." She held his gaze for a moment, then nodded slightly. That's not always the same thing. He had smiled then, but it didn't reach his eyes. When Erica became pregnant, the timing in another version of their lives might have brought them closer. For a brief moment, it almost did. Alexander had stood still when she told him, his expression unreadable, before it softened into something that resembled relief. "That's unexpected," he had said. "But not unwelcome?" she asked gently. He hesitated, just long enough for her to notice. "No," he replied, "not unwelcome." For a few weeks, he tried. He asked about doctor appointments. He made an effort to be home for dinner. He even suggested they look at larger apartments, something with more light, more space. But the effort didn't last. Work intensified. Or perhaps his attention shifted more decisively toward it. Erica stopped asking him to come with her to appointments after the second time he canceled. The first cancellation came with an apology. The second came with a message sent minutes before the scheduled time. Something urgent came up. "We'll talk tonight." They didn't. Erica sat alone in the waiting room, her hands folded over a future she was already preparing to carry without him. The doctor spoke kindly, professionally, filling the room with reassurance. Erica listened, nodded, asked the necessary questions. She took notes. Not because she needed to, but because writing things down gave her a structure that emotions did not. When she returned home, Alexander was already there, seated on the couch, his laptop open. His attention divided between numbers and something unseen. "How did it go?" he asked without looking up. "Everything is fine," Erica said. "That's good." There was no follow-up question. No pause. No adjustment. The distance between them didn't feel like an argument. It felt like subtraction. It became more visible in small things. Alexander began managing their finances more tightly. What had once been a shared account became something he monitored with quiet scrutiny. He didn't accuse Erica of spending excessively. He didn't need to. The way he reviewed transactions, the questions that followed, even minor purchases, created a different kind of pressure. "Do we need this?" he asked once, holding up a receipt for prenatal vitamins. Erica looked at him, not defensively, just steadily. "Yes." He nodded, but the conversation lingered longer than it should have. Another time, he mentioned his colleagues' spouses. "Most of them contribute," he said casually, scrolling through his phone. "They have their own careers. It changes how things look." Erica didn't respond immediately. She understood the statement wasn't about information. It was about comparison. "I used to work," she said after a moment. "I know," he replied. "I'm just saying it's different now." Different. The words settled between them like a quiet verdict. Erica adjusted her routines. She spent more time alone, not withdrawn, but self-contained. She read more, organized more, observed more. If Alexander noticed, he didn't comment on it. He had begun to speak about the future in ways that no longer included shared language. "I need to be where opportunities are," he said one night, pacing slightly as he spoke. "There's a level I'm trying to reach, and it requires alignment." Erica sat at the table, her posture straight, her expression neutral. Alignment with what? With people who understand the stakes. She held that thought carefully before responding. "And I don't," he hesitated again. That same fractional pause. "It's not about understanding," he said. "It's about position." The conversation ended there. Not because it was resolved, but because it had already revealed what it needed to. Erica didn't argue. She didn't ask him to explain further. She didn't need to. She had already begun to see the pattern. What Alexander valued was shifting. And as it shifted, so did the space he allowed her to occupy. One evening, weeks later, as the city outside moved in its usual rhythm of urgency and light, Erica's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. She let it ring once, twice, then answered. "Erica Long," a male voice asked, calm and measured. "Yes, my name is Jonathan Pierce. I'm calling regarding a matter that concerns you directly. I believe it would be best if we spoke in person." Erica's expression didn't change. She glanced toward the living room where Alexander sat, absorbed in his screen, unaware of the call unfolding just a few steps away. "What kind of matter?" she asked. "A private one," Jonathan replied. "But I can assure you it is significant." There was no urgency in his tone, no attempt to persuade, just certainty. Erica considered the silence on the line, considered the weight of a conversation that had not yet begun. When she asked, "As soon as possible." She nodded slightly, though he couldn't see it. "Tomorrow." "Tomorrow," he repeated. The call ended without embellishment. Erica stood still for a moment, her hand resting lightly against the edge of the table. Then she placed her phone down exactly where it had been before as if nothing had shifted. Across the room, Alexander laughed quietly at something on his screen. He didn't look up. He didn't ask who had called. And Erica didn't tell him, not yet, because whatever was coming next, it wasn't something that needed to be announced. It only needed to arrive. The first time Alexander spoke about Erica, as if she were a limitation, he did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. It happened over dinner at his parents' house in Westchester, a place that had always been more about presentation than comfort. The table was set with precision. The lighting was warm but deliberate. Every detail suggested control. Erica noticed all of it the moment she stepped inside. Margaret Brooks greeted her with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She was a woman who had spent years perfecting the appearance of grace while reserving judgment for private moments that were rarely as private as she believed. Erica Margaret said, her tone measured. "You're looking, well." Erica nodded politely. "Thank you for having me." Lindsay Brooks, seated already with her phone angled just slightly away from the table, glanced up with a brief, appraising look. "You're still working from home?" Lindsay asked, not as a question, but as an observation waiting to be corrected. Erica took her seat. "Not at the moment." "Oh," Lindsay replied, a small smile forming. "That must be convenient." Alexander said nothing. He poured himself a drink, his movements controlled, as if silence were a neutral choice rather than a position. Dinner began with the usual exchanges, updates about work, mentions of acquaintances, subtle comparisons disguised as conversation. Erica listened, her hands folded neatly in her lap between courses, her posture composed. She noticed when her name stopped being included. "She's focusing on the pregnancy," Alexander said at one point, answering a question that hadn't been directed to him. "Which makes sense, I guess." Margaret tilted her head slightly. "Of course. Though balance is important. Women manage both all the time." Erica looked at her calmly. "Some do, and some choose not to," Lindsay added lightly. The words landed softly, but their intent was clear. Erica didn't respond. Not because she agreed, but because she understood something more useful than agreement or disagreement. This was not a conversation designed for resolution. It was a performance. Alexander leaned back slightly, his expression thoughtful, as if considering a point rather than defending a person. "It's just different," he said. "Where I am now, things are competitive. People look at everything. Everything." Erica noted the word, the way it extended beyond finances into identity itself. "And what do they see?" Margaret asked. Alexander hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Then they see potential." The omission was more telling than any direct statement. Erica lowered her gaze briefly to her plate, not in submission, but in observation. She had learned that what people chose not to say often carried more weight than what they did. Later, as dessert was served, Lindsay leaned forward slightly, her tone more conversational now, but no less pointed. "I met someone at a fundraiser last week," she said. "She's in her early 30s, already leading a major division at her firm. Pregnant too. It's impressive." Margaret nodded. "That's the kind of resilience that stands out." Alexander's expression shifted, not in discomfort, but in quiet agreement. Erica saw it, not because it was obvious, but because she had been watching long enough to recognize the smallest adjustments. No one at the table asked Erica about her day. No one asked about the child. And Alexander did not fill the silence. When they left, the night air felt colder than it should have. The drive back to the city was quiet at first. The kind of quiet that could either be peaceful or strained, depending on what had preceded it. Erica watched the lights pass by through the window, each one. Momentary, each one moving on without pause. "You didn't have to come," Alexander said eventually. His tone was neutral, almost casual. Erica turned her head slightly. "I thought it mattered." He shrugged lightly. "It does, just Not like that. She considered his words carefully, like what he kept his eyes on the road, like something that needs to be defended. There it was again. Not an accusation, a classification. Erica let the silence settle after that. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she understood that this was no longer a space where words would shift anything meaningful. By the time they reached home, the distance between them had grown not through conflict, but through clarity. Over the following weeks, the pattern became more consistent. Alexander didn't need to be openly cruel. His indifference was precise enough. He began to reference Erica less when speaking to others. Introductions became shorter, explanations more vague. "This is Erica," he would say, without context, without connection. At events, he moved ahead of her rather than beside her. At home, conversations became functional. "Did you pay the bill? Did the package arrive? Did you confirm the appointment?" Each question transactional, each answer contained. Erica adapted without announcing it. She created her own structure within the space he had withdrawn from. Her days became organized around preparation, doctor visits, reading, quiet planning. She wrote things down, not just schedules, but observations, dates, conversations, shifts in tone. She didn't label them as evidence. Not yet, but she recognized their potential. It was during one of those quiet afternoons, the apartment filled with a stillness that no longer felt temporary, that her phone rang again. The same number. Miss Long, Jonathan Pierce said when she answered, "Thank you for agreeing to meet." They had met the previous day in his office, a space that reflected discretion more than display. He had spoken carefully, outlining details that didn't immediately align with the life Erica had known. Now his tone carried a different weight. "I've completed the initial verification," he continued. "There are documents I'd like you to review in person. It would be best not to delay." Erica sat at the table, a pen resting between her fingers. "I understand," she said. There was a brief pause on the line. Miss Long, Jonathan added, his voice steady. "What you're about to see may change how certain situations are handled moving forward." Erica's expression remained composed. "I'll be there." She ended the call and sat still for a moment. Across the room, Alexander's laptop screen reflected faintly against the glass of the window. Numbers, charts, projections, his world contained within measurable outcomes. He still hadn't asked about the previous call. He hadn't noticed the shift. Or perhaps he had and dismissed it. Either way, it no longer required his awareness to become real. That evening, as they sat in the same space, but occupied different realities, Alexander spoke again about work. "There's a new investor group looking into our sector," he said, scrolling through something on his phone. "They're aggressive, strategic. People are paying attention." Erica looked up briefly. "Do you know who they are?" "Not yet," he replied. "But whoever it is, they're going to reshape things." He sounded almost impressed. Erica nodded once, then returned her attention to the page in front of her. She didn't mention that she would be sitting across from Jonathan Pierce again the next morning. She didn't mention the documents waiting to be signed. She didn't mention the name that had already begun to connect itself to hers in ways Alexander could not yet see. Because for now, the silence was still more effective than revelation. And Erica had always understood the value of timing. By the time Alexander Brooks stopped pretending to be discreet, the shift had already taken shape long before it became visible. Erica noticed it first in his schedule. Late meetings became routine. Dinners moved from occasional to expected. His phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, now remained within reach at all times. Notifications appeared, were read, and dismissed with a precision that suggested curation rather than habit. He no longer explained where he had been, and Erica no longer asked. It was not resignation. It was recognition. The first time she saw Sophia Whitmore, it was not through introduction. It was through reflection. Erica had been standing in the hallway outside their apartment, her hand resting lightly against the wall as she adjusted her balance. Pregnancy had begun to alter her center of gravity in subtle ways. The elevator doors at the far end of the corridor opened with a soft, mechanical glide. Alexander stepped out first. Behind him, framed momentarily by the mirrored interior of the elevator, was a woman Erica had never seen before. Tall, composed, deliberate in her movements. Sophia Whitmore did not look around the hallway as someone uncertain of her place. She moved as if she had already been invited into it. Erica didn't step forward immediately. She watched. Alexander said something Erica couldn't hear. Sophia smiled, controlled, measured, not spontaneous. The kind of smile that acknowledged advantage rather than affection. Then Alexander reached for the door. Their door. That was when Erica stepped fully into view. For a fraction of a second, Alexander paused. Not because he was surprised, because he hadn't expected to be observed. Erica, he said, his tone neutral, as if he were naming an object rather than addressing a person. Sophia's gaze shifted toward her, assessing without hesitation. "And this is Sophia?" asked. Alexander didn't rush the answer. "This is Erica," he said. No explanation, no context, just a name. Erica held Sophia's gaze calmly. Erica Long. Sophia inclined her head slightly. Sophia Whitmore. The air between them settled into something structured, not tense, but defined. No one apologized. No one clarified. Alexander unlocked the door and stepped inside, holding it open without looking back. Sophia followed without hesitation. Erica entered last. Inside, the apartment felt different, not physically, but in how it was occupied. Alexander moved toward the kitchen, pouring himself a drink with the ease of someone reclaiming space. Sophia remained standing near the center of the room. Her posture relaxed, but intentional, her attention moving across the interior as if cataloging it. "It's a nice place," she said. "It works," Alexander replied. Erica set her bag down quietly. She didn't ask why Sophia was there. She didn't ask how long this had been happening. She already knew the answers would not change anything. Instead, she observed. The distance between Alexander and Sophia was minimal, but not careless. It suggested familiarity, not secrecy. They spoke about work, about mutual connections, about future plans that did not require explanation. Erica stood slightly apart, not excluded but not included either. At one point, Sophia glanced toward her. "And you?" she asked. "What do you do, Erica?" The question was polite. Its intent was not. Erica met her gaze. "I'm preparing for what comes next." Sophia smiled faintly. "Aren't we all?" Alexander said nothing. The conversation moved on without her. Later, after Sophia left, her departure as composed as her arrival, Alexander didn't attempt to explain. He didn't need to. "This is how things are now," he said, setting his glass down with controlled finality. Erica nodded once. "I understand." And she did. Not emotionally, structurally. Over the following days, Sophia's presence became more consistent. She visited again and again. Each time with less pretense. Alexander no longer adjusted his behavior based on Erica's presence. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't create distance. If anything, his actions became more deliberate, as if clarity itself were a form of justification. Erica adapted in equal measure. She maintained her routines. She kept her space organized. She continued attending her appointments alone. But beneath the surface, something else had begun to take shape. Her second meeting with Jonathan Pierce did not resemble the first. This time, the documents were laid out before she arrived. Folders, contracts, statements. Each one precise, each one waiting. Jonathan didn't rush the conversation. As I mentioned, he said, sliding the first document toward her, the estate in question is extensive. The transition process is structured in phases. Discretion remains critical. Erica reviewed the page in front of her. Names, entities, numbers that extended beyond anything she had previously associated with her life. She didn't react outwardly. "What is required of me?" she asked. Jonathan folded his hands. "For now, acknowledgement, authorization for preliminary transfers, and your signature." Erica picked up the pen. She read every line, not quickly, not casually, deliberately. "What happens after this?" she asked. "The structure becomes active," Jonathan replied. "Accounts, holdings, investment channels. You will be positioned as the controlling party, though not publicly, not yet." Erica nodded. "And confidentiality?" she asked. "Absolute," Jonathan said. "Until the appropriate time." Erica signed. Not impulsively, not emotionally. With clarity. Each document followed. Signature after signature. A sequence of decisions that would not reveal themselves immediately but would move quietly into place. When she finished, she set the pen down exactly where it had been. Jonathan gathered the documents with care. "There are additional steps," he said. "Meetings with financial advisors, strategic planning. We will proceed methodically." Erica stood. "I understand." As she left the office, the city outside felt unchanged. Cars moved, people walked. Conversations unfolded without awareness of what had just shifted behind closed doors. But Erica understood something that could not be seen from the outside. Change did not need to announce itself to be real. Back at the apartment, Alexander was on a call. "No, we'll secure the funding," he was saying, pacing slightly. "It's just a matter of timing." He glanced at Erica briefly as she entered, then continued speaking. "Yes, I'll handle it." He ended the call and set his phone down. "We're expanding," he said, as if offering information rather than inviting response. Erica placed her keys on the table. "That sounds significant." "It is," he replied. "We're bringing in outside capital, strategic partners." Erica nodded once. "Do you know who they are?" she asked. "Not yet," Alexander said. "But they're moving aggressively, buying into multiple firms. It's creating pressure." He sounded focused, engaged, unaware. Erica observed him for a moment. Then she looked away, because she understood something he didn't. The pressure he was describing had already begun. And he had already stepped inside it, without realizing who was building it. Alexander Brooks chose a Tuesday, not because it meant anything, not because it was symbolic, but because it was efficient. Efficiency had become the way he justified decisions that no longer required reflection. Erica noticed it the moment he walked in. Not the time he had been coming home late for weeks, but the way he closed the door. Controlled, final, as if something had already been decided elsewhere and was only now being delivered. She was at the table, a notebook open in front of her, pen resting between her fingers. The apartment was quiet in a way that no longer felt temporary. "You're home early," she said. Alexander loosened his tie, setting his keys down with deliberate care. "We need to talk." There was no hesitation in his voice. Erica nodded once. She closed the notebook gently, aligning it with the edge of the table before looking up at him. "I assumed that would happen eventually," she replied. Alexander paused just briefly, not because he was reconsidering, but because he hadn't expected the acknowledgement. "This isn't working," he said. The words were direct, practiced perhaps, not emotional. Erica held his gaze. "What part of it?" He exhaled slightly, as if the question required more detail than he had intended to give. "All of it," he said. "The timing, the circumstances, the misalignment." The word again. Erica nodded slowly. "You've been using that word a lot. It's accurate. For you, she said. Alexander didn't respond to that. He moved toward the counter, pouring himself a glass of water, this time not alcohol. His movements were precise, controlled. I've been thinking about this for a while, he continued, and it's clear that we're on different paths. Erica's expression didn't change. We were on the same path once. That was before he replied. Before what? He turned to face her fully now. Before things became more serious, he said. Before expectations changed. Erica rested her hands lightly on the table. You mean before your expectations changed? Alexander's jaw tightened slightly, but his tone remained even. I need to be realistic, he said. About where I'm going, about what I need. And what do you need? Erica asked. He didn't hesitate this time. A partner who matches my level, he said. The sentence settled into the room with a clarity that required no interpretation. Erica absorbed it without visible reaction. And I don't? She asked. Alexander looked at her, not unkindly, but without softness. Not in the ways that matter now, he said. There it was. Not anger, not cruelty, just conclusion. Erica lowered her gaze for a moment, not in defeat, but in consideration. When she looked back up, her expression was unchanged. And the child? She asked quietly. Alexander's expression shifted, but only slightly. I'll provide support, he said. Financially. Erica nodded once. And beyond that, she asked. He hesitated. I don't think it's realistic for me to be involved in the same way, he said. The words were careful, measured, detached. Erica let the silence stretch for a moment. Then she spoke again. When did you decide this? She asked. Alexander exhaled. It's been building, he said. But recently it became clear. Erica didn't ask what had made it clear. She already knew. Sophia, she asked instead. Alexander didn't flinch. She understands my world, he said. And I don't. It's not about understanding, he replied. It's about alignment. Erica nodded slowly. Yes, she said. You've made that clear. The conversation paused there. Not because it was incomplete, because it had reached its intended end. Alexander moved toward the table, placing a folder in front of her. I've already spoken to a lawyer, he said. This is straightforward. No complications. Erica looked at the folder. White, unmarked, precise. She opened it carefully. Divorce papers, prepared, organized, efficient. She read the first page without rushing. Alexander watched her, his posture composed as if waiting for resistance that he could then address. It didn't come. Take your time, he said. Erica turned the page. I don't need much time, she replied. Alexander blinked just once. You've thought about this? He asked. I've observed it, she said. He didn't respond. Erica continued reading. Each clause, each condition. There were no surprises, minimal support, no shared assets of significance, a clean separation, as if the years they had spent together could be reduced to a set of manageable terms. She reached the final page, the signature line. She picked up the pen. Alexander leaned forward slightly. You're not going to contest anything, he asked. Erica looked at him. What would I be contesting? She asked. He hesitated. The terms, he said. The timeline. Erica considered that. Then she shook her head. No, she said. And then without pause she signed. Her name moved across the page with steady precision. Erica Long. No hesitation. No correction. Just completion. She placed the pen back down exactly where she had found it. Alexander watched the signature as if it confirmed something he had already believed. This is for the best, he said. Erica closed the folder. For you, she replied. He didn't argue. because in his mind, that was the only perspective that mattered. Later that evening, as the apartment settled into a quiet that felt more permanent than before, Erica stood by the window. The city light's face stretched out before her, indifferent to individual decisions. Her hand rested lightly against her abdomen. A future that had just been redefined. Not diminished, redefined. Her phone vibrated softly in her hand. A message from Jonathan Pierce. We're ready to proceed with the next phase. Erica read it once, then again. She typed her response carefully. Understood. I'm ready. She sent the message and lowered the phone. Behind her, Alexander moved through the apartment with the ease of someone who believed he had simplified his life. He didn't look at her. He didn't notice the message. He didn't ask what she was doing. And Erica didn't offer the information. Because the moment for explanation had already passed. What remained was execution. And for the first time, the direction of that execution no longer depended on him. Erica Long left the apartment on a Thursday morning with a single suitcase. She didn't rush. There was no visible urgency in the way she moved. No last-minute gathering of forgotten items, no hesitation at the doorway. Every object she chose to take had already been considered days before. What remained behind had been assessed just as carefully. Alexander wasn't there to watch her leave. He had a meeting, or at least that was what he had said the night before, already halfway out of the conversation before it had properly begun. There was no suggestion that he should stay. No expectation that this departure required acknowledgement. Erica closed the door quietly behind her. The hallway was still. The kind of stillness that existed only in transitional spaces, places people pass through without staying long enough to leave an imprint. Her footsteps were soft against the carpet, measured and even. She didn't look back. Outside, the city carried on without interruption. A car passed. Someone crossed the street with a phone pressed to their ear. A delivery truck idled near the corner. Nothing about the morning suggested that a life had just shifted in a way that could not be undone. Erica placed her suitcase into the trunk of a waiting car. The driver, a man in his 40s with a neutral expression, nodded once. "Miss Long?" "Yes." He opened the door for her. No questions, no conversation. The car pulled away from the curb, merging into traffic with quiet precision. Erica sat in the back seat, her hands resting lightly in her lap. She watched the city pass by, not with nostalgia, but with clarity. There was nothing in what she was leaving behind that required revisiting. Not because it hadn't mattered, but because it no longer defined anything moving forward. The apartment she moved into was smaller, functional, deliberately chosen. It sat on a quieter street away from the glass towers and curated lobbies that had become part of Alexander's world. The building itself was unremarkable, which was precisely why Erica had selected it. No assumptions, no expectations. Inside, the space was clean, minimal, and filled with natural light that softened the edges of everything it touched. Erica placed her suitcase near the wall and stood still for a moment, taking in the room, not as a loss, but as a reset. There was work to be done. Later that afternoon, she sat across from Jonathan Pierce again, this time in a different office, larger, more secure, designed for conversations that did not leave the room. A second man was present. Miss Long, Jonathan said, gesturing toward him. "This is Daniel Reeves. He'll be assisting with the financial structuring moving forward." Daniel Reeves stood, offering a brief professional handshake. "It's a pleasure." Erica nodded. "Thank you for being here." They sat. No small talk. No unnecessary preamble. Daniel opened a folder, sliding a series of documents across the table. "We've initiated preliminary transfers," he said. "The assets are being moved into a layered structure for discretion and control. You will maintain full authority, though your name will not be directly visible at this stage. Erica reviewed the pages. Accounts, holdings, entities connected by design rather than visibility. What is the timeline, she asked. Immediate activation, Daniel replied. Full integration over the next several weeks. We're prioritizing stability before expansion. Erica nodded. And investment strategy, she asked. Daniel glanced briefly at Jonathan, then back at Erica. We've identified several sectors with high leverage potential, he said. Finance infrastructure and most relevant private equity groups currently experiencing liquidity strain. Erica's expression remained unchanged. Which firms, she asked. Daniel slid another document forward. Names. Familiar ones. One in particular stood out. The firm Alexander worked for. Erica's gaze rested on it for a fraction of a second longer than the others. Not surprise, recognition. They're vulnerable, she asked. Daniel nodded. More than they appear. External pressure is building. With the right positioning, control could be established within months. Jonathan leaned forward slightly. This would not be personal, he said carefully. It would be strategic. Erica closed the folder. All decisions are strategic, she replied. There was no emphasis in her voice, no indication of motive, just acknowledgement. Daniel continued. We would proceed through intermediary funds, he said. No direct link. Gradual acquisition. Influence before visibility. Erica considered the structure, the timing, the alignment. Begin with minority stakes, she said. No sudden movements. Daniel nodded. Understood. And maintain full discretion, she added. Of course. The meeting concluded without ceremony. Documents were gathered. Instructions were clear. Execution had begun. Meanwhile, across the city, Alexander Brooks stood in a room filled with people who believed they understood the direction of power. A private gathering, selective, strategic. He moved easily through conversations, his confidence restored by the absence of what he had defined as complication. She signed without a fight, he said to a colleague, a glass in his hand. Clean break. The colleague raised an eyebrow. That's rare. Alexander shrugged slightly. It made sense for her. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The narrative was simple, efficient, unchallenged. Sophia Whitmore stood nearby, her presence as composed as ever. You handled it well, she said. Alexander glanced at her, a faint smile forming. It was necessary. Sophia nodded. Clarity is always better than uncertainty. Alexander lifted his glass slightly. Exactly. Around them, conversations shifted toward opportunity. New investments, emerging players. A particular topic surfaced more than once. There's a fund moving aggressively, someone said. No one knows who's behind it. Alexander's attention sharpened slightly. I've heard, he said. They're targeting mid-tier firms, strategic acquisitions. More than that, another voice added. They're positioning for control. Alexander considered that. Interesting, he said. Not concern, not yet. Just interest. Back in her apartment, Erica sat by the window, a notebook open in front of her. She wrote sparingly. Not everything needed to be recorded. Only what mattered. Dates, movements, decisions. Her phone rested beside the notebook, silent for the moment. The room was quiet, but not empty. It was filled with intention. Outside, the city moved as it always did, unaware of the structures forming within it. Inside, Erica remained still. Not waiting, not reacting, but moving forward in a way that required no announcement. Because the shift that had begun was no longer theoretical. It was operational, and it was already in motion. The name Richard Long had never been part of Erica's daily vocabulary, not in conversation, not in memory, not in the quiet spaces where people usually return to what defines them. And yet by the time Jonathan Pierce spoke it aloud, in a controlled windowless conference room, it carried a weight that required no introduction. Erica sat across from him, her posture steady, her hands resting lightly on the table. The documents in front of her had already outlined the legal framework. What remained now was context. Richard Long passed away 6 weeks ago. Jonathan said, his tone measured. The estate has been under temporary management pending verification of succession. Erica listened without interruption. He left specific instructions. Jonathan continued. Clear, structured, non-contestable. He slid a document forward. A copy of the will. Erica read the first line, then the next. Her eyes moved steadily across the page, absorbing each clause without visible reaction. If there was surprise, it did not show. If there was emotion, it remained contained. "What is my legal relationship to him?" she asked. Jonathan didn't hesitate. "He was your biological father." The words entered the room without force, but they did not require emphasis. Erica's gaze remained on the document. There were no photographs attached, no personal letters, no attempt to construct sentiment. Only facts, verified, documented, final. Why was this not disclosed earlier, she asked. Jonathan folded his hands. Mr. Long maintained strict privacy regarding personal matters, he said. Your identity was protected intentionally. The reasons for that decision were not included in the will. Erica nodded once. She did not ask for speculation. She did not ask for explanation beyond what was legally relevant. What matters now, Jonathan continued, is that you are the sole beneficiary of his estate. Erica turned the page. The numbers had been outlined before, but seeing them within the context of origin altered their meaning slightly, not in magnitude, but in structure. Assets spanning multiple sectors, holding companies layered across jurisdictions, liquid capital positioned for immediate deployment, a total valuation that settled at approximately $14.7 billion. Erica closed the document gently. And the conditions, she asked. Jonathan reached for another folder. There are several, he said, the most significant being confidentiality during the initial transfer phase. No public disclosure, no direct association between your name and the estate until full integration is complete. Erica listened. Additionally, Jonathan continued the estate is structured to maintain operational continuity. Existing leadership remains in place, unless you choose to intervene. Erica considered that. And control, she asked. Yours, Jonathan replied, absolute, but exercised through layered entities for discretion. Erica nodded slowly. There was no visible shift in her posture, no outward sign that anything had changed. But something had, not in her demeanor, in her position. What is the timeline for full transfer, she asked. 30 to 60 days, Jonathan said. Accelerated if necessary. Erica glanced at the documents again, then back at Jonathan. Begin immediately, she said. Jonathan inclined his head. Of course. There was a brief pause. Not awkward, not uncertain. Just a moment where the structure of the conversation had reached its natural end. Miss Long, Jonathan added, his tone slightly more deliberate. This level of control comes with visibility. Eventually, the decision of how and when to engage publicly will be yours. Erica absorbed that without comment. I understand, she said. The meeting concluded without ceremony. No dramatic realization, no emotional release, just acknowledgement. Outside, the city remained unchanged. Inside, the architecture of power had shifted quietly into her hands. In the days that followed, Erica's schedule adjusted with precision. Meetings were set, documents reviewed, structures activated. Daniel Reeves became a consistent presence, guiding the financial execution with the same measured tone Jonathan had used for legal matters. We've initiated positions in 3 sectors, Daniel explained during one session. Primary focus remains on financial institutions with exposure to short-term liquidity gaps. Erica reviewed the summary. And the firm we discussed, she asked. Daniel nodded. Initial stake acquired, he said. Indirect. Below reporting thresholds. Erica's gaze rested briefly on the name. Alexander's firm. Not highlighted, not emphasized, but present. What is their current position, she asked. Stable on the surface, Daniel replied, but reliant on external capital for expansion. Vulnerable to influence if pressure increases. Erica closed the file. Maintain the current pace, she said. No acceleration. Daniel made a note. Understood. Erica leaned back slightly. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that existed when decisions had already been made and execution was simply catching up. This is not about disruption, she added. It's about structure. Daniel nodded again. Of course. Across the city, Alexander Brooks was experiencing the same market shift from a different perspective. He stood in a conference room surrounded by colleagues, a presentation projected behind him. Numbers filled the screen projections, forecasts, assumptions built on patterns that had held until recently. We're seeing increased competition, he said, gesturing toward a chart. New capital entering the space. Aggressive positioning. A colleague leaned forward. Do we know who's behind it, she asked. Alexander shook his head. Not yet, he said. But they're strategic. They're not just investing, they're shaping direction. There was a pause as the room absorbed that. Should we be concerned, someone else asked. Alexander considered the question. Concern isn't the right word, he said. Awareness is. He moved to the next slide. We adjust, he continued. We position ourselves ahead of the curve. Confidence, controlled, unquestioned, for now. Later that evening, Erica sat alone in her apartment, a cup of tea cooling beside her, untouched. Her notebook lay open, a single line written across the page. Not a plan, not a reaction, just a statement. Control does not require visibility. She closed the notebook gently. Her hand rested briefly against her abdomen. The future was no longer abstract. It had structure, it had direction, and it had time. Her phone vibrated softly. A message from Jonathan. All primary transfers completed. You are now fully in position. Erica read the message once, then set the phone down. No response was necessary, because the transition was no longer in progress. It was complete, and everything that followed would not be about becoming. It would be about choosing. The invitation arrived in a thick ivory envelope. Erica noticed the weight of it before she read the name. It had been delivered by hand, placed precisely at the front desk of her building, with instructions to ensure it reached her directly. No digital copy, no casual notification. The method itself suggested intention. She turned the envelope over once in her hands before opening it. The paper inside was textured expensive without being excessive, the kind of detail designed to communicate status without appearing to try too hard. Alexander Brooks and Sophia Whitmore request the honor of your presence at their wedding. The wording was formal, measured, impersonal. Erica read it once, then again. Her expression did not change. There was no immediate reaction, no visible discomfort, no trace of irony. She simply placed the invitation down on the table, aligning it carefully with the edge as if it were another document among many. But it was not just an invitation. It was a statement, a controlled extension of the narrative. Alexander had already constructed one in which Erica remained part of the past, reintroduced only to reinforce the distance he believed he had created. She understood that. What she also understood was something Alexander did not: timing. Later that afternoon, Erica sat across from Jonathan Pierce and Daniel Reeves once more, the invitation now resting between them on the table. Jonathan glanced at it briefly, then back at Erica. "I assume this was not unexpected," he said. "No," Erica replied. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "The event itself could present complications," he said. "Public visibility, uncontrolled variables." Erica nodded. "Yes," she said. "It could." There was a pause. Jonathan spoke next. "The question is whether your presence serves a purpose," he said. "At this stage, discretion remains our primary advantage." Erica considered the invitation again. Then she looked up. "It does," she said. Daniel exchanged a brief glance with Jonathan. "In what way?" he asked. Erica's tone remained even. "Timing," she said. She didn't elaborate immediately. Instead, she reached for a folder already prepared beside her. Inside were documents structured, organized, precise. "Full transfer is complete," she continued. "Control is established. What remains is execution at the appropriate moment." Jonathan nodded slightly. "And you believe this event provides that moment?" he asked. Erica held his gaze. "Yes." Daniel exhaled quietly. "In that case," he said, "we need to prepare for controlled disclosure." Erica nodded. "Not full disclosure," she clarified. "Not immediately." Jonathan leaned back slightly. "Then staged," he said. "Sequential," Erica confirmed with a small movement of her head. "Legal first," she said. "Then financial." Daniel made a note. "And the point of initiation?" he asked. Erica's eyes moved briefly to the invitation. "Public setting," she said. "Maximum clarity." Jonathan considered that. "There will be risk," he said. "Yes," Erica replied. There was no hesitation. "Prepare the documentation," she added. "All relevant ownership records, investment structures, control agreements." Daniel nodded. "We'll have everything ready," he said. Jonathan closed the folder in front of him. "And your role in the presentation?" he asked. Erica's expression remained composed. "Minimal," she said. Jonathan studied her for a moment. "You're certain?" he asked. "Yes." There was no emphasis, no need, because Erica had already decided something that did not require explanation. She would not speak unless necessary. She would not respond to anything that did not require response. She would allow the structure itself to reveal what needed to be understood. Across the city, preparations for the wedding moved forward with precision. Sophia Whitmore stood in a fitting room, surrounded by mirrors and soft lighting, the dress she had chosen falling perfectly into place. With the assistance of a designer who understood both form and expectation. "It's exactly what I wanted," Sophia said, turning slightly. The designer smiled. "It suits you." Sophia's reflection was flawless, controlled, confident. Behind her, Alexander watched with quiet approval. "It's perfect," he said. Sophia met his gaze through the mirror. "Everything should be," she replied. Their tone matched, aligned. Alexander stepped closer. "The guest list is finalized," he said. "Selective, strategic." Sophia nodded. "And her?" she asked. Alexander didn't need clarification. "She received the invitation," he said. Sophia's expression didn't shift. "Will she come?" she asked. Alexander considered that. "I don't know," he said. "But it doesn't matter." Sophia turned to face him fully. "It matters," she said. "Everything visible matters." Alexander smiled faintly. "If she comes," he said, "it will only reinforce the narrative." Sophia studied him for a moment. "And what narrative is that?" she asked. Alexander's tone remained calm. "That some people don't belong in certain spaces," he said. Sophia held his gaze. "And you're certain of that?" she asked. Alexander didn't hesitate. "Yes, Erica sat alone that evening, the invitation still on the table where she had left it. Her apartment remained quiet, ordered, intentional. She had not changed her surroundings to reflect what she now controlled. There was no visible difference between her life before and her life now, except in structure. She reached for the invitation again, opening it once more, not to read the words, but to observe the details. The choice of venue, the timing, the positioning, everything had been considered, just as everything she was now preparing had been considered. Her phone vibrated. A message from Daniel. Initial documentation compiled. Review tomorrow. Erica typed a brief response. Confirmed. She set the phone down and leaned back slightly in her chair. Her hand rested again briefly against her abdomen. The future remained present, constant, unchanging in its direction. But everything around it had begun to shift, not loudly, not visibly, but decisively. She closed the invitation and placed it back on the table. Aligned, exact. Then she turned off the light. The room settled into darkness, interrupted only by the faint glow of the city beyond the window. Somewhere across that city, preparations continued, expectations formed, assumptions solidified. And none of them accounted for what had already been set into motion, because the most significant changes rarely announce themselves. They arrive quietly. They take position, and they wait. Erica Long did not prepare for the wedding the way most people would. There was no search for a statement dress, no consultation about appearance, no attempt to construct an impression that would counter what others already believed about her. She did not need to correct perception. She only needed to understand timing. The invitation remained on the table for 3 days before she responded. Not because she was uncertain, because delay when controlled carries its own message. On the 4th day, she sent a brief confirmation through the formal RSVP channel. Attending, no additional note, no condition, no hesitation. Across the city, the confirmation was received with quiet satisfaction. Alexander read it on his phone between meetings, his expression unchanged except for a faint tightening at the corner of his mouth. "She's coming," he said to Sophia later that evening. Sophia adjusted a bracelet at her wrist, her movements precise. "I assumed she would," she replied. Alexander leaned back slightly. "It's predictable," he said. "She won't want to miss it." Sophia met his gaze. "People rarely miss moments that define them," she said. Alexander didn't question the statement. He believed he already understood what that moment would represent. Erica's preparation took a different form. The next morning, she sat in a private conference room with Jonathan Pierce and Daniel Reeves. The table in front of them was covered with documents layered, categorized, each one representing a component of a structure that had already been built but not yet revealed. Jonathan spoke first. "We need to finalize the sequence," he said. "Legal disclosure must precede financial confirmation. Otherwise, it risks appearing reactive." Erica nodded. "Agreed," she said. Daniel slid a document forward. "These are the ownership records," he explained. "All entities connected to the investment positions, including the controlling stakes in Brooks Capital." Erica reviewed the page. The name sat there without emphasis. Brooks Capital, Alexander's firm. Now part of a structure he did not see. "What is the current percentage?" she asked. "Just under controlling threshold," Daniel replied. "But with proxy alignment, effective control is already established." Erica closed the file. "And the trigger?" she asked. Jonathan answered this time. "A formal notice," he said, "delivered through legal counsel, recognition of ownership and authority. It will be undeniable." Erica considered the phrasing. "Not aggressive," she said. "Precise." Jonathan inclined his head. "Of course." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Timing is critical," he added. If this is executed during the event, it will be highly visible. Erica met his gaze. That is the point, she said. There was no emphasis, no attempt to dramatize, just clarity. Jonathan tapped a pen lightly against the table. Then we need to account for response, he said. From Alexander, from other stakeholders. Erica's expression remained unchanged. Response does not alter structure, she said. Jonathan paused, then nodded. No, he agreed. It doesn't. The following days moved with quiet precision. Erica met with additional advisors, legal, financial, operational. Each conversation added a layer to the execution, but none altered its direction. She reviewed emails, bank records, transfer confirmations, every detail aligned. Nothing rushed, nothing left uncertain. At no point did she express urgency, because urgency suggests reaction. And this was not a reaction, it was timing. Across the city, Alexander's schedule intensified. Meetings extended longer than expected. Calls multiplied. Conversations shifted from expansion to adjustment, though no one labeled it that way. In one meeting, a senior partner leaned forward, concern visible despite attempts to contain it. We're seeing pressure from external positions, he said. Quiet acquisitions, coordinated. Alexander listened, his posture controlled. From who, he asked. We're still tracing it, the partner replied. It's layered. Deliberately, Alexander nodded once. Then we respond the same way he said. Strategically. Without visibility. The partner hesitated. It may already be beyond that stage, he said. Alexander's expression didn't change. Nothing is beyond adjustment, he replied. The confidence remained. But something beneath it had begun to shift. Not visibly, not yet. Sophia Whitmore observed that shift before Alexander acknowledged it. She didn't question him directly. She didn't challenge his assessment, but she noticed the longer pauses between his responses, the way his attention lingered on details that had previously required no second thought. One evening, as they reviewed seating arrangements for the wedding, she spoke without looking up. You're distracted, she said. Alexander adjusted a card on the table. I'm focused, he replied. Sophia glanced at him. There's a difference, she said. Alexander met her gaze. Everything is under control, he said. Sophia held that look for a moment longer than necessary. Then she nodded. As long as it is, she said. Erica's final meeting before the wedding took place 2 days prior. Jonathan Pierce closed the last folder with deliberate care. All documents are prepared, he said. Delivery is scheduled. Timing aligned with your instructions, Daniel Reeves added. Financial confirmations will follow immediately. There will be no gap. Erica listened. And discretion, she asked. Jonathan answered. Maintained until the exact moment of disclosure, he said. Erica nodded. There was nothing left to adjust, nothing left to prepare. Only execution remained. She stood gathering nothing from the table. Everything she needed was already in place. Then we proceed, she said. The night before the wedding, Erica sat alone in her apartment. The invitation rested in front of her one final time. She did not open it. She did not need to. Her phone lay beside it, silent. No new messages. No unexpected developments. Everything was exactly as it should be. She leaned back slightly, her gaze moving toward the window. The city beyond remained constant. Lights shifting. Movement continuous. Unaware. Her hand rested lightly against her abdomen. A quiet, grounding presence. Not a reminder of what had been lost, but of what remained, and what would continue. She closed her eyes briefly, not in hesitation, in clarity, because the next day was not about confrontation. It was not about correction. It was not even about revelation. It was about alignment. structure meeting visibility, truth meeting timing, and the moment when silence would no longer be necessary. When she opened her eyes again, nothing had changed, except that everything was ready. The hotel had been chosen for its symmetry, not just architectural, but social. Everything about the space suggested balance control and visibility. The marble floors reflected light with deliberate precision. The chandeliers above did not overwhelm. They illuminated. Every surface had been polished to remove imperfection, every angle considered to support the illusion that nothing unexpected could happen within it. By late afternoon, the ballroom had begun to fill. Guests arrived in measured waves. Executives, investors, extended networks of influence that extended beyond the city and into circles that rarely intersected without intention. Conversations moved easily between finance and familiarity, each greeting carrying a subtle calculation of relevance. Alexander Brooks stood near the center of it all. His posture was composed, his expression controlled. He moved through the room with ease, acknowledging each arrival with the confidence of someone who believed he had aligned himself correctly. "Good to see you," he said, shaking hands, maintaining eye contact just long enough to reinforce connection without appearing dependent on it. He wore the role well. Nearby, Sophia Whitmore stood with equal precision. Her presence complemented his, not overshadowing, not secondary. Balanced. Intentional. She engaged with guests in a way that reinforced the structure Alexander had built around himself. Conversations flowed through her with clarity and restraint, each one reinforcing the same underlying narrative. This was a union of alignment. At no point did either of them appear uncertain. At no point did either of them acknowledge the variable that had not yet entered the room. Erica Long arrived without announcement. No one escorted her in. No one introduced her. She stepped into the ballroom as the doors opened briefly to allow another group of guests to pass through her presence, folding quietly into the space, rather than interrupting it. Her clothing was simple, deliberate, a soft, neutral-tone dress that did not compete with the environment around her. No visible attempt to elevate or diminish her appearance. She had chosen not to participate in the visual language of the room, which made her noticeable in a way that did not rely on attention. She paused just inside the entrance for a moment, not to gather herself, to observe the layout, the positioning, the flow of movement. She noted where Alexander stood, where Sophia was positioned, where clusters of influence formed and dissolved. She also noted something else. Near the far edge of the room, partially obscured by a column, Jonathan Pierce stood in a dark suit, a slim folder held at his side. He did not approach her. He did not signal. But his presence confirmed what had already been established. Everything was in place. Erica moved forward, not quickly, not slowly, with the same measured pace she had maintained in every space she entered. At first, no one recognized her, or rather, they did not register her as relevant. Conversations continued around her. Glasses lifted, laughter moved in controlled bursts through carefully constructed social circles. Then someone turned. A brief glance, a second look. Recognition. It moved quietly like a shift in current beneath the surface. "That's her," someone said softly. "His ex-wife. Isn't she?" The words trailed off, incomplete, but understood. Erica did not respond to any of it. She moved toward an empty space near the side of the room, not isolated, but not central. A position that allowed her to see without being immediately engaged. A server passed by. She declined a drink with a slight shake of her head. Her hands remained still, her posture unchanged. Across the room, Alexander noticed the shift before he saw the source. A slight redirection of attention, a subtle break in conversational rhythm. He followed the line of sight. And then he saw her, Erica, standing exactly where she had chosen to stand. Not concealed, not highlighted, present. For a brief moment, something in his expression paused. Not confusion, recognition. Then it resolved. He adjusted his posture slightly, the movement small enough to appear natural, and turned toward her. Sophia followed his gaze. Her eyes found Erica immediately. There was no visible reaction, only assessment. She came, Sophia said quietly. Alexander's tone remained even. I told you she would. He placed his glass down on a nearby table. Stay here, he said. Sophia did not object. She watched as Alexander moved across the room. His path was direct, but not rushed. He greeted one or two guests along the way, maintaining the appearance of normalcy. But his focus did not shift. Erica saw him approaching. She did not move. When he reached her, he stopped at a distance that was neither close nor distant. Appropriate, controlled. Erica, he said, her name spoken without emphasis. She met his gaze. Alexander. There was no additional greeting, no acknowledgement of time past, no reference to context. He glanced briefly at her attire, then back to her face. You made it, he said. I confirmed that I would. She replied. He nodded. Yes, he said. You did. There was a pause, not awkward, not comfortable, just present. Alexander shifted slightly, his attention moving beyond her for a moment, aware of the subtle attention now directed toward them. I didn't expect you to arrive so early, he said. Erica's tone remained even. I prefer to understand a room before it changes, she said. Alexander held her gaze for a moment longer. Then he smiled, not warmly, but effectively. Well, he said, you're here now. Erica did not respond. He gestured lightly toward the room. Feel free to make yourself comfortable, he added. Enjoy the evening. The phrasing was deliberate, positioning her as a guest, as an observer, as someone without influence over what was about to unfold. Erica inclined her head slightly. Thank you, she said. Alexander studied her for a fraction of a second longer. Then he turned, returning to the center of the room, to the structure he believed remained intact. Erica remained where she was. She did not follow. She did not move closer to the center. Instead, she allowed the room to continue around her. Conversations resumed. Music shifted slightly. The rhythm of the event stabilized again. But something had changed. Not visibly, not yet, but perceptibly. Because her presence had introduced a variable that did not align with the assumptions the room had been built on. And even those who did not fully understand why began to feel it. Near the far edge, Jonathan Pierce adjusted his position slightly, not stepping forward, not initiating, waiting, because timing had not yet been reached. And Erica understood that. She did not look toward him. She did not signal. She simply stood, watching, listening, allowing the structure of the room to reveal itself fully before it was altered. Because once altered, it would not return to its previous form. And the moment before that change was always the most revealing. The room adjusted around Erica Long without ever formally acknowledging that it had done so. At first, it was subtle. A delay in laughter that arrived half a second too late. A glance that lingered just slightly longer than intended. Conversations that continued but with a quieter edge, as if each word now passed through an additional filter before being spoken. No one announced the shift, but everyone felt it. Alexander Brooks returned to the center of the room with the same composure he had carried all evening. His posture remained controlled, his movements deliberate. If there was any awareness of the change, he did not allow it to surface. Instead, he leaned into the structure he understood best, visibility. A member of the event staff approached him quietly, confirming that the next phase of the evening was ready to begin. Alexander nodded once, then turned slightly, raising his glass with just enough presence to draw attention without demanding it. Gradually, the room followed. Conversations tapered. Guests shifted their focus toward him. The ambient movement slowed into a collective pause. Sophia Whitmore stepped into position beside him. Her expression composed her presence, reinforcing the balance he intended to project. Alexander waited until the room settled. Then he began. "I appreciate everyone being here tonight," he said, his voice steady, carrying easily across the space. "This evening represents something important not just personally, but professionally. Alignment, clarity, moving forward with intention." The words were familiar, constructed, designed to resonate with the audience he had gathered. Several guests nodded. Others lifted their glasses in quiet acknowledgement. Alexander continued. "There are moments in life where you recognize what works and what doesn't," he said. "And having the ability to act on that recognition is what defines progress." His gaze moved across the room as he spoke, measured, intentional, until it reached Erica. He did not pause. But the direction of his words shifted. "Not everything we hold on to is meant to stay," he said. "Some things are part of a process necessary at the time, but ultimately temporary." A few guests exchanged glances. Not confusion, understanding. The implication did not need to be explained. Alexander took a small step forward. "And sometimes," he added, his tone unchanged, "it takes clarity to recognize the difference between where you've been and where you belong." There it was. Not explicit, but unmistakable. A ripple of restrained amusement moved through a small portion of the room, not loud enough to disrupt the formality, just enough to confirm alignment. Sophia remained still beside him, her expression unchanged. Erica did not move. She stood exactly where she had been, her posture steady, her gaze level. She did not look away. She did not react. But her stillness had weight, more than the words directed toward her, because it did not engage, it did not defend. It simply remained. Alexander lowered his glass slightly, allowing the moment to settle. Then, with a faint smile that suggested control rather than warmth, he continued. "I'd like to acknowledge someone who is here tonight," he said. "Someone who was part of an earlier chapter of my life." Now the attention shifted more directly. Eyes moved, heads turned. Even those who had not yet noticed Erica were now aware of her. Alexander gestured lightly in her direction. "Erica," he said. Her name entered the room without embellishment, without respect, without context beyond what had already been implied. A space opened around her, not physically, but socially. The kind of distance created when attention isolates rather than includes. Alexander's voice remained calm. "She represents a time when things were different," he said. "A time before I understood what was necessary to move forward." A few quiet laughs surfaced. Contained, controlled, encouraged. Erica did not respond. Her expression remained unchanged. But something in the room shifted again. Not because of what Alexander had said, because of how she did not react to it. Margaret Brooks, standing among a small group near the front, observed the moment with quiet approval. Lindsay Brooks leaned slightly toward a friend, whispering something that resulted in a brief, muted laugh. Sophia watched more closely. Not Erica's face, her posture, her stillness, the absence of reaction. It did not align with expectation. Alexander continued, unaware of the nuance unfolding beyond his immediate control. "There's value in recognizing when something no longer fits," he said, "and having the discipline to make the necessary changes." His tone carried conviction, not aggression, which made the message more acceptable to those listening, more justifiable, more aligned with the narrative he had constructed. He raised his glass slightly. To clarity, he said. Several guests followed. To clarity. The phrase echoed lightly through the room. Erica remained still. She did not lift a glass. She did not lower her gaze. She simply stood. And in that stillness, something began to shift beneath the surface. Not in Alexander's words, but in the perception of them. A man near the back of the room, a senior investor who had seen more than he had spoken throughout the evening, watched the interaction with a slight narrowing of his eyes. He wasn't reacting to the content. He was observing the imbalance, the disproportion between what was being said and what was being received. Because Erica did not appear diminished. She did not appear affected. If anything, she appeared unchanged. And that absence of visible impact created a quiet question, one that did not yet have language, but existed nonetheless. Alexander lowered his glass, satisfied with the moment. The room began to relax again, conversations resuming with a renewed sense of alignment. But the shift remained. Subtle, unspoken, persistent. Erica turned her head slightly, her gaze moving briefly across the room. Not searching, not avoiding, simply acknowledging the space. For a fraction of a second, her eyes aligned with Jonathan Pierce's. No signal passed between them, no visible exchange. But the timing had been noted. And the next phase had already been set into motion. Erica returned her gaze forward, her posture unchanged, her expression composed. Because the moment that had just passed was not the climax. It was confirmation, and everything that followed would not be a response. It would be structure. The applause that followed Alexander's toast was polite, measured. It carried just enough volume to sustain the illusion of unity without fully committing to it. Conversations resumed in controlled fragments, voices returning to their previous levels, but something underneath had shifted. Not dramatically, not visibly, but structurally. Erica Long remained where she was. She did not reposition herself to re-enter the social flow. She did not step forward to respond or retreat to avoid attention. She held her place with the same quiet precision that had defined her presence since she entered the room. Across the ballroom, Jonathan Pierce adjusted his stance. The movement was minimal, a slight repositioning of weight, a subtle shift of the folder in his hand. But it marked a transition. Timing had been reached. He began walking, not quickly, not slowly, with a kind of deliberate pace that suggested purpose without urgency. He moved along the perimeter of the room, passing through the edges of conversations that paused just long enough to register his presence before resuming. No one stopped him. No one questioned him, because he carried himself like someone who belonged. When he reached Erica, he stopped at her side, not in front of her, not behind her. "Aligned, Miss Long," he said quietly. Erica inclined her head slightly. "Mr. Pierce." The exchange was brief, contained, but it did not go unnoticed. A few nearby guests turned subtly, drawn not by the words, but by the alignment. Jonathan opened the folder. The motion was precise. Inside were documents that had already been reviewed, signed, executed. What remained was acknowledgement. "Shall we proceed?" he asked. Erica's response was equally controlled. "Yes." Jonathan turned, not toward Erica, toward the center of the room, toward Alexander Brooks. He walked forward with the same measured pace, the folder held at a natural angle, neither concealed nor displayed. It took several seconds for the movement to register. A guest paused mid-sentence. Another turned. A line of sight formed. And then Alexander saw him. For a moment there was no recognition, just assessment. Another guest approaching. Another interaction to manage. Jonathan stopped at a respectful distance. "Mr. Brooks," he said, Alexander inclined his head slightly. Yes, my name is Jonathan Pierce. I represent Miss Erica Long. The room did not fall silent, but it narrowed. Conversations softened. Attention shifted. Alexander's expression remained composed. Is there something you need, he asked. Jonathan held his gaze. Yes, he said. He extended the folder. A simple gesture, controlled, irreversible. Alexander hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then he took it. Not out of curiosity, out of expectation that whatever it contained would be manageable. He opened it. The first page. A formal notice. Structured, precise. His eyes moved across the text. The change when it came was subtle. A slight tightening around the eyes. A pause in the movement of his hand. He turned the page. Another document. Ownership records, entity structures, names that connected in ways that did not align with his understanding of the current landscape. He continued reading. Silence began to form, not imposed, but emerging. Sophia stepped closer. What is it? She asked quietly. Alexander did not respond immediately. His attention remained fixed on the pages. Jonathan spoke. For clarity, he set his tone. Even the documents you are reviewing confirm the current ownership structure of Brooks Capital and its associated entities. Alexander looked up. Not fully, just enough to shift focus from the page to the man standing in front of him. That's not possible, he said. The words were controlled, but they carried the first trace of disruption. Jonathan did not react. It has already been executed, he replied. Alexander's gaze sharpened. By who, he asked. Jonathan's answer did not change in tone. Miss Erica Long. The name moved through the room differently this time. Not as reference, as fact. Sophia's expression shifted slightly but noticeably. That doesn't make sense, she said. Jonathan turned his attention briefly toward her. The structure is outlined in full within the documentation, he said, including all relevant financial positions, investment channels, and controlling interests. Alexander flipped through the pages again. Faster now. Not scanning, searching. Emails, bank confirmations, transfer records. Each one aligned, each one verified, each one removing space for interpretation. This is incomplete, he said. There has to be. There isn't, Jonathan said. No interruption, no emphasis, just completion. Around them, the room had begun to quiet. Not entirely, but enough. Guests watched without appearing to, listened without speaking, because something had shifted beyond the boundaries of the event. Alexander lowered the folder slightly. His gaze moved across the room, searching until it found her, Erica. She had not moved, not closer, not further, exactly where she had been. Her posture unchanged, her expression composed. She did not step forward. She did not speak. She simply stood. And in that stillness, the structure became visible. Alexander took a step toward her, not rushed, but no longer controlled. The distance between them closed in measured increments. The room followed, not physically, but in attention. When he reached her, he stopped. Closer this time, no longer maintaining the earlier distance. What is this? He asked. The question was direct, but it lacked the certainty it had carried before. Erica met his gaze. A clarification, she said. Her tone remained even. No accusation, no explanation beyond what was necessary. Alexander held her eyes. This isn't real, he said. Erica did not respond immediately. She allowed the moment to settle. Then it is she said. Nothing more, no elaboration, because everything else was already in his hands. Behind him, Sophia remained still. Her attention moved between Erica and the documents, her expression no longer aligned with certainty. Jonathan stood at a distance now, no longer central. Because the structure had already been delivered. What remained was recognition. And the room was no longer what it had been. For a moment, the room did not know how to respond. Not because nothing had happened, but because too much had. The music had not stopped yet. It no longer defined the space. Conversations had not ended yet. No one was speaking with intention. The structure of the evening, the carefully constructed flow of celebration, alignment, and affirmation, had been interrupted by something that did not fit within it. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. Alexander Brooks stood facing Erica Long, the folder still in his hand, open, unresolved. He looked down again as if repetition might alter the content. It didn't. The documents remained the same. Ownership structures, controlling interests, legal confirmations that did not invite interpretation. His name appeared within them, not as authority, as subject. "This doesn't make sense," he said again, quieter this time. Not to Erica, not to Jonathan, to himself. Erica did not respond, because the statement was no longer a question. It was a process, and processes take time. Behind him, Sophia Whitmore stepped forward, her movements slower now, more deliberate. "Let me see," she said. Alexander did not immediately hand her the folder. For a fraction of a second, he held it as if possession alone might maintain control. Then he released it. Sophia took the documents, her eyes scanning quickly at first, then more carefully. Her posture shifted. Not dramatically, but enough. "This is layered," she said. Jonathan Pierce spoke from where he stood. Intentionally, he replied. Sophia looked up. "And verified?" she asked. Jonathan met her gaze. Completely. No hesitation, no qualification. Sophia returned her attention to the pages. Her expression did not collapse. It recalibrated, because she understood something Alexander had not yet allowed himself to see. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a structure, and it had already been built. Around them, the room continued to narrow. Guests did not move closer. They did not need to. Attention had already converged. A senior partner from Alexander's firm stepped forward, his tone controlled but edged with concern. "Alexander," he said quietly, "what is this?" Alexander did not answer immediately. He was still looking at Erica, as if the answer existed there. "What have you done?" he asked. The phrasing carried an assumption: action, intent, intervention. Erica's response did not match it. "Nothing recent," she said. Her tone remained steady, measured, as if the timeline he was reacting to had already passed. Alexander's brow tightened slightly. "That's not possible," he said. Erica held his gaze. "It is," she replied. Again, no elaboration, because the documents had already done that. Jonathan stepped forward, just enough to re-enter the frame. "For clarity," he said, addressing not just Alexander, but the space around him. "The acquisitions referenced in those documents were initiated several weeks ago through intermediary entities. The positions were established gradually to avoid market disruption." The senior partner looked between them. "And now?" he asked. Jonathan answered without pause. "Now the structure is complete," he said. "Control is consolidated." The words settled differently than anything that had been said earlier in the evening, because they were not part of a narrative. They were conclusion. Alexander exhaled slowly, his composure adjusting under pressure. "This affects more than just me," he said. Jonathan inclined his head slightly. "Yes," he said, "it does." Sophia closed the folder, carefully, deliberately. She looked at Erica again, Not with dismissal, not with curiosity, with assessment. "You planned this," she said. It was not an accusation, it was recognition. Erica met her gaze. "I prepared," she said. The distinction remained, clear. Sophia absorbed that. Then she nodded once. Not agreement, acknowledgement. Alexander turned slightly, his attention moving toward the partner who had stepped forward. "We need to review this internally," he said. "There are procedures, Jonathan said. The interruption was calm, precise. "But they do not alter the current ownership structure." Alexander's jaw tightened. "You're saying this is final?" he asked. Jonathan's answer did not change. "Yes. No emphasis, no escalation, just fact." Around them, the room had reached a new state. Not silence, but suspension. The kind that exists when a system recognizes that its previous assumptions no longer apply. Margaret Brooks stood near the edge of the gathered attention, her expression no longer composed. "This can't be right," she said, her voice low but audible. Lindsay Brooks did not speak. Her earlier confidence had dissolved into stillness, because what had once been social positioning had become something else. Something measurable. Something real. Alexander turned back to Erica. His voice, when he spoke again, had shifted. Not louder, but less certain. "You should have said something," he said. The statement carried more than frustration. It carried an expectation. Erica did not respond immediately. She allowed the space between them to hold the weight of what had already been revealed. Then there was nothing to say, she replied. Her tone remained even. Because for her, the process had not been about announcement. It had been about execution. Alexander looked at her as if trying to reconcile two versions of the same person. The one he had dismissed, and the one standing in front of him now. But the difference was not in Erica, it was in what he had failed to see. Sophia stepped back slightly, not withdrawing, repositioning. Because the structure she had aligned herself with was no longer stable, and she understood that before Alexander did. The senior partner spoke again, more directly this time. "We need to step aside," he said to Alexander. "Now." Alexander hesitated, then nodded. Not agreement, recognition. They moved a few steps away, voices lowered but no longer contained within certainty. Jonathan returned to Erica's side. "It's done," he said quietly. Erica did not look at him. "I know," she replied. Her gaze remained forward, not focused on Alexander, not focused on the room, but on something beyond both. Because the moment that had just unfolded was not the end. It was the point where structure replaced perception. And everything that followed would not be about revealing more. It would be about living with what had already been revealed. The room did not return to its previous state. It adjusted, quietly, irreversibly. Clusters of conversation reformed, but not around celebration. Voices lowered not out of courtesy, but calculation. People who had arrived expecting alignment now measured distance. Those who had spoken with certainty reconsidered what they had attached themselves to. Alexander Brooks stood a few steps away from Erica Long, no longer at the center of anything. The folder remained in his hand, closed now, but not resolved. The senior partner from his firm, Michael Grant, spoke to him in low, controlled tones. Their conversation was private in volume, but visible in posture. Michael's shoulders were squared, his stance direct. He was no longer deferring. He was assessing. "This isn't external pressure," Michael said. "This is structural control." Alexander exhaled slowly, his attention still divided between the documents and Erica's presence across the room. "There has to be a way to reverse it," he said. Michael shook his head once. "Not tonight," he replied. "And not without confirming everything in those documents." Alexander's jaw tightened. "This affects our entire position," he said. Michael's response was immediate. "It already has." There was no argument in his tone, just recognition. Across the room, Sophia Whitmore stood still, her attention no longer centered on Alexander. She had stepped back, not physically distant, but strategically removed. Her posture remained composed, her expression controlled, but the alignment she had represented earlier in the evening had shifted. She watched Erica now, not with hostility, not with curiosity, with recalibration, because what had been presented as a fixed structure had revealed itself to be conditional. And Sophia understood conditions. Margaret Brooks approached Alexander, her composure thinner now, her voice edged with restrained urgency. "Alexander," she said, "what is happening?" Alexander did not answer immediately. He looked at her, then back at the room, then toward Erica. "It's a misunderstanding," he said. The words lacked the certainty that they had once carried. Margaret's expression tightened. "It doesn't look like one," she replied. Lindsay stood slightly behind her, silent, for the first time that evening, because there was nothing to add. No comment that would restore what had already shifted. Alexander stepped away from them, not abruptly, but with purpose. He moved back toward Erica. The distance between them closed again. This time there was no audience pretending not to watch. Attention followed him, not out of curiosity, out of consequence. He stopped in front of her, closer than before, no longer maintaining formality. "What do you want?" he asked. The question was direct, but it revealed something. Assumption. That this moment required negotiation, that control could still be rebalanced through intent. Erica met his gaze. Nothing she said. Her tone remained even. No emphasis, no pause. Alexander's expression shifted. "That's not how this works," he said. Erica held his eyes. "It is," she replied. Again, no elaboration, because the structure did not require it. Alexander exhaled his control, adjusting again. "You've made your point," he said. "Now we can talk about how to move forward." The phrasing changed, from dismissal to engagement. But still within his framework, Erica did not accept it. "There's nothing to discuss," she said. Alexander's brow tightened. "This is my firm," he said. Erica's response came without delay. "Not anymore." The words were quiet, but they settled with precision. No escalation, no force, just fact. Alexander looked at her, searching for something that would allow him to reposition the moment. "You could have told me," he said again. The repetition carried less accusation now, more realization. Erica's gaze did not shift. It wouldn't have changed anything she said. And she was right. Because the decisions that had led them here were not based on information. They were based on perception. And perception does not adjust simply because facts exist. Alexander's shoulders lowered slightly, not in defeat, in recognition. Sophia stepped forward then, not to stand beside him, to stand across from Erica. Her movements were controlled, her expression composed. "Why here?" she asked. The question was not emotional, it was strategic. Erica turned her attention to her. "Clarity," she said. Sophia considered that, then nodded once. "Yes," she said, "it is." There was no further exchange, because Sophia understood something Alexander was still processing. This was not retaliation. It was structure revealed at the point where it could no longer be ignored. Michael Grant approached again, his tone now more formal. "Alexander," he said, "we need to address this immediately." Alexander nodded. "Yes," he said. He looked at Erica one more time, not with certainty, not with dismissal, with something closer to recognition. Then he turned and walked away, not toward the center of the room, toward a smaller space at the edge where conversations could occur without performance. Sophia did not follow immediately. She remained where she was for a moment longer, her attention still on Erica. Then she inclined her head slightly, a gesture without clear meaning, acknowledgement, or closure. Then she turned as well. Margaret and Lindsay remained where they were no longer certain where to stand, because the structure they had aligned themselves with had shifted beyond their influence. Erica did not move. She had not stepped forward. She had not raised her voice. She had not responded beyond what was necessary. And now there was nothing left to reveal. Jonathan Pierce approached quietly. "It's complete," he said. Erica nodded once. "Yes," she replied. There was no satisfaction in her expression, no visible reaction at all. Because for her, this had not been about the moment. It had been about the process, and the process had concluded. She turned toward the exit, not quickly, not slowly, with the same measured pace she had carried from the beginning. The room did not stop her. No one spoke, no one intervened. They watched, not because they needed to understand, because they already did. And as Erica Long walked out of the ballroom, she did not take anything with her that had not already been hers. She simply left behind what no longer had any claim. Erica Long did not wait for the room to recover. She stepped out of the ballroom before the silence behind her had fully settled into understanding. The doors closed with a soft, controlled sound, barely audible against the distant echo of voices that had not yet found their new structure. The hallway beyond was quiet. Not empty, but neutral. A transitional space that did not carry the weight of what had just occurred. Erica walked without hesitation. Her pace remained, even her posture unchanged. There was no visible shift in her expression, no indication that anything within her had been unsettled by what she had left behind. Because nothing had. Outside, the night air carried a different kind of clarity. The city moved as it always did, uninterrupted, unaware, unchanged by individual outcomes. Traffic flowed, lights shifted. People continued their own trajectories, each one contained within its own structure of intention. Erica paused briefly at the edge of the entrance. Not to reflect, to confirm that nothing behind her required her return. A black car waited near the curb. The same driver stepped forward, opening the door without a word. "Miss Long." Erica inclined her head slightly. She entered the car. The door closed, and the vehicle moved forward. No rush, no urgency, just direction. Inside the ballroom, the aftermath did not unfold with noise. It unfolded with adjustment. Michael Grant had already gathered a small group of senior partners in a side room. The door closed, voices low but focused. Documents were being reviewed again, not for understanding, but for verification. The language had already been clear. What remained was confirmation. Alexander Brooks stood near the far end of the room, no longer engaging with guests. The event hadn't been formally ended, but it no longer existed in the way it had been intended. His attention remained on the folder, open again, not searching now, absorbing, each page reinforcing the same conclusion. Ownership had shifted, control had been redefined, and it had not required his participation. Sophia Whitmore stood across the room, speaking quietly with someone who had already begun to distance themselves from the event. Her posture remained composed, but the alignment she had represented earlier had dissolved into something more measured. When she finished the conversation, she did not return to Alexander. She moved toward the exit. Not abruptly, not dramatically, just as Erica had. Because the structure she had chosen no longer supported the position she had intended to occupy. Margaret Brooks sat for the first time that evening. Not out of fatigue, out of uncertainty. Lindsay stood beside her, silent. Because there were no longer words that could shape perception into something more favorable. The room continued to reorganize itself, quietly, without instruction, because the underlying structure had already been altered. In the car, Erica leaned back slightly, her gaze directed toward the window. The city moved past in fragments of light and shadow. Nothing required her attention. Nothing demanded her response. Her phone rested beside her, silent. No messages, no calls, no attempt to reconnect what had already been concluded. She did not reach for it, because there was nothing left to confirm. Her hand moved almost unconsciously to rest against her abdomen. A steady presence, not defined by the past, not influenced by what had just occurred, but continuing, independent, constant. The future had not changed direction. It had only clarified its path. Days passed, not dramatically, not marked by sudden shifts, but with quiet progression. Legal confirmations continued. Operational transitions moved into place. What had been established in structure now became visible in practice. At Brooks Capital, internal meetings replaced external projections. Roles were reassessed, authority redefined. Alexander remained present, but no longer central. His position had not disappeared. It had been repositioned, from control to participation, and that distinction carried weight. He did not contact Erica, not immediately, not after the first day, not after the second, because whatever he might have said would not alter what had already been executed. And for the first time, he understood that, not fully, but enough. Erica's life did not expand outward. It refined. Her apartment remained the same. Her routines unchanged. Meetings continued, but they were deliberate, structured around decisions rather than reactions. Jonathan Pierce and Daniel Reeves remained in contact, but less frequently, because the system they had established no longer required constant adjustment. It functioned. Erica reviewed reports, signed documents, made decisions that extended beyond her immediate visibility. But she did not seek visibility because she did not need it. One afternoon, weeks later, Erica stood near the window again. The same position, the same view. But the context had shifted. Not around her, within her. Her phone vibrated once. A message from Jonathan. Final transition complete. All entities fully integrated. Erica read it, then set the phone down. No reply, because acknowledgement was no longer necessary. Everything that needed to be done had been done. She stood there for a moment longer, then turned away, not towards something new, but towards something already in motion. Because what remained was not about what she had left behind. It was about what she would build. And that did not require noise. It did not require recognition. It did not require explanation. Only clarity. Erica Long did not look back, not at the ballroom, not at the moment, not at the version of herself that had stood there and been defined by others. Because she had never been defined by them, only perceived that way. And perception, once corrected, does not require revisiting. She moved forward, not quickly, not slowly, with the same measured pace she had always carried, but now with something else beneath it. Not power, not status, but certainty. And that was enough. In the end, nothing about Erica's story was loud. There was no confrontation that demanded attention, no revenge that needed to be witnessed, no moment that required her to raise her voice or reclaim anything through force. What unfolded instead was quieter, more precise. She was dismissed in a room full of people who believed they understood value, judged in a space that measured worth through visibility, reduced to a version of herself that was easier to overlook than to question, and she allowed it. Not because she agreed, but because she understood something deeper, that timing reveals more than reaction ever could. When the truth arrived, It did not argue. It did not accuse. It simply aligned itself with structure, with fact, with everything that had already been set into motion long before anyone thought to look for it. And in that moment, no one needed to be convinced, because clarity does not need volume. It only needs to be seen. If you've stayed with this story until now, you've witnessed what happens when silence carries intention, when patience becomes direction, and when dignity remains intact, even when everything around it shifts. Wherever you're watching from and whatever time it is there, I'd be interested to know, what would you have done in her place? And if stories like this resonate with you, you can stay for more. Not because they promise dramatic endings, but because they reveal something quieter and often more true.